Here at the InfernoFox gaming channel, I talk about a myriad of games from a number of genres. I often highlight RPGs as this is one of my favorite genres that I like to play. I also enjoy platformers, action games, first-person shooters, music-based games, and more. And based on the title you clicked into, yes, I too enjoy puzzle games. To that end, I absolutely love Tetris, and the numerous versions of it that have come out since Alexei Pajitnov invented it back in 1985. The premise of Tetris is simple, and often like the work one does in corporate America, errors pile up and accomplishments disappear. The player moves 7 different puzzle pieces called tetraminos, turns them as they fall, with the goal of laying them in flat lines that clear once completed. By completing a line of 4 at once, this is called completing a Tetris, and the player is rewarded with large points, or a bunch of garbage being sent to their opponents, depending on the mode being played. The game is simple in premise and execution, yet there are numerous strategies abound and a multitude ways to play. From slow and steady to a world record-breaking pace like 13-year-old Willis Gibson who crashed the NES port of Tetris, there is no wrong way to play, and a lot of fun to be had in doing so. There are a bunch of benefits from playing Tetris personally, from curbing addiction cravings, increasing brain functioning, to even improving overall mental health. There's been dozens upon dozens of versions of Tetris that have been released since 1985, not to count the number of unofficial versions, iterations, sequels, spin-offs, and more. To that end, this top 10 will only focus on what I personally believe are the best ports of Tetris, and Tetris alone. Again, no spin-offs, offshoots, or anything like that will be ranked. Sorry, Dr. Mario, Tetris Attack, Tricky Towers, you have no power here. We'll get started with ranking, but don't forget to like or dislike, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. And finally, you're going to notice that the background music won't be Tetris related. Most of the music in Tetris is either the iconic theme that is playing now, which is actually called Korobeiniki, but hearing different versions of it throughout this list could become a little bit irksome. And there are certain versions of Tetris all feature that either have generic music or none whatsoever. That being said, please enjoy light music from some of my favorite RPGs. So let's start our ranking off with number 10, Tetris on Android and iOS, released in 2011. I was preparing to pull footage from the version of Tetris that I had paid for on my iPhone like over a decade ago, except that apparently it won't let me play it anymore. Stuff like this are small warnings of the coming digital-only age. When you buy things, you're really only just renting them for a slightly longer period. Okay, getting off my physical media soapbox, I'm still going to put the current version of Tetris I found in the iOS shop on here for a number of reasons. First off, it's free. Well, freeware anyway. Second, it's Tetris. There's a few modes that can be played, and if we overlook all of the paid premium content, it is still a serviceable and decent Tetris game. Being able to play Tetris on the go at any time from your pocket or purse is always handy. It's still quite colorful and sports the Korobeiniki theme as well. Number 9, Tetris on Windows, released in 1990. And when I say Windows here, I mean like Windows 98, 95, or even the ancient Windows 3.1. I still felt the console versions of Tetris that released around the same time were the best, but playing Tetris at home, both in Windows and DOS, was fantastic. There was no music and the sound effects were really basic, but at least it too was colorful and had the classic Tetris touch. Plus, it's these versions of Tetris that I remember Peter Gibbons playing in Office Space while ignoring his boss Bill Lumbergh, as well as Ryan playing in The Office while ignoring his boss Jim. The general malaise captured by both workers in the American corporate culture by casually playing this game, and in my opinion poorly, cements these versions of Tetris, at least within the business cultural lexicon. Number 8. Tetris on Electronika 60, created in 1985. This is literally the very first version of Tetris ever made, again as created by Alexei Pajitnov back in 1985 in the Soviet Union. What you're seeing here is an online version available that simulates how it originally looked, though of course even this simulation looks so much better than the original version. It's here in the top 10 simply due to being the first version of Tetris, but even it looks like an ASCII art-led dream, it's still the game of Tetris that we've all grown to know and love. It's amazing to think how far Tetris has come in the past 40 years and 520 million copies sold. Number 7. Tetris on Game Boy, released on July 31st, 1989. This version of Tetris was the boilerplate and standard for which all versions of Tetris should be judged against. The cons are that it's only in black and white, and it only has the A-type marathon mode and B-type line clearing modes. While extremely basic, it did at least add a multiplayer version that its Nintendo-developed counterpart on the original NES didn't have. But there were a number of things that made Tetris on the Game Boy special. One thing was that it was a pack-in title for the original Game Boy. This made selling over 35 million copies become the second best-selling version of Tetris to this day possible. Another thing was that this was the first time I could remember seeing adults play video games. It did such a great job of capturing the hearts and minds of both adults and children, and it probably had a hand in inspiring the cinematic masterpiece that is the 7th Police Academy movie, subtitled Mission to Moscow. Seriously though, when the Wii was lauded as a game system that attracted adults of all ages to it, I was reminded of Tetris on the Game Boy, as that too was successful at this. And I'll briefly mention Tetris DX on the Game Boy Color. I loved how it could save high scores, and again was in color, but the spin trick that could cause Tetraminos to fall back up, as well as the music completely being different, dwarfs what the original Game Boy Tetris had. Number 6. Tetris on the Nintendo Entertainment System, developed by Nintendo, released in November 1989. This is fairly similar to the Game Boy version of Tetris with a few notable changes. First off, the Korobeiniki theme that we all know and love was changed to the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy from Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker. Another change is that there's no multiplayer like the Game Boy version. But beyond that, I believe this NES version is the superior version to the Game Boy one, simply because of the colorful blocks and ability to be played on the big screen. This was my first entry that I'd ever played Tetris on, and I've got so many memories of taking turns playing this game with my brother and mother, competing to get the highest score and last the longest before the speed would get us, and high levels had us spend many hours playing it. And for that, I'll always have a soft spot for this version of Tetris. Number 5. Tetris on Nintendo Entertainment System, developed by Atari and published by Tangen, released in May 1989. While I have a soft spot for the first-party Nintendo version of Tetris, I have to concede that the Atari Tangen one is the superior version. While it doesn't have the line-clearing B-type, it does have both competitive and cooperative 2-player and computer player modes. Scoring acts a bit differently here too, as points are not only given for lines cleared, but also the speed at which blocks are dropped. With Nintendo's Tetris, scoring of singles through Tetrises themselves increase the higher a level is, though this stays the same with Tengen's version, and scoring for these doesn't occur until the player completes every 30 lines. The music has different tracks as well, though the 4 tracks here are often seen in other versions of Tetris from around this time. Atari Tengen's version is also one of many versions that were released in the arcades, and it was only this one that I personally have seen in the arcades and played there as well. Number 4. Tetris and Dr. Mario on the Super Nintendo, released December 30th, 1994. This version doesn't break my rule of no spin-offs simply because the version of Tetris that exists on this cartridge was the best version of Tetris released for that time. It has both multiplayer and versus computer modes, while also having the original music from the Game Boy version. It also runs extremely well, more so in the vein of classic Tetris, versus all of the modern frills current versions have today, like being able to hold pieces and continue to spin Tetraminos once they land. Still, the core gameplay has never looked better, and the best way to play with a friend is still the mixed match mode. Yes, it does have Dr. Mario in it, but it does combine both the B-type and A-type modes. I'm still hoping Nintendo uses this mixed match mode again sometime in the future, though implementing improvements like versus computer and saving best high scorers in A-type. I've gotten burned by getting up to level 19 and having an epic score, just to have my screen fill up and restart back at the default level, then have the time run out and I'm stuck with a score that I restarted with. While all mixed matches are timed, for some reason the timer also was never shown. Number 3. Tetris Effect, released November 9th, 2018. This version of Tetris is excellent, though its update to Tetris Effect Connected wears the crown as the best version. The Connected update released in July 2020 on more consoles like the Xbox Series Ones, PC, Steam, and more. It also added a classic mode of gameplay that facilitated classic Tetris and its NES aesthetics. But where Tetris Effect excels the most is both in execution and style. For the former, the game can not only be played pancake style, but also using VR, and it's this latter state that makes a great argument for VR itself. Regarding the style of Tetris Effect, this is easily seen by both the absolutely stellar soundtrack, but also the trippy aesthetics that are beautiful to behold in VR. And not only are there a number of great single-player modes, such as classic Type A Marathon and more newer ones, Tetris Effect has a robust multiplayer mode. This includes co-op modes like Connected, where 3 players must battle computer-controlled bosses, as well as one-on-one scoring modes and more. This is one of the best Tetris experiences you can currently play on all major consoles. Number 2, Tetris DS, released March 20th, 2006. So, being totally honest, I haven't logged much time with this entry. I've only just played it while doing research for this particular video. I've heard of how much people love this version, but now that I've logged some time, I can understand why. This version of Tetris is probably one of the first instances of quote-unquote modern Tetris that I've seen. When I say modern, I mean of course being able to put Tetraminos in hold status, seeing more than just one Tetramino in the queue, and being able to spin them even once they've landed. But even with these changes making it modern, these allow Tetris to appeal more to a mainstream and especially newer sets of players. This version of Tetris is also surrounded by a classic NES games aesthetic, ranging from Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2 to Zelda and Metroid, to even more obscure games like Ice Climbers and even Devil World. Many modes such as Mission, Catch, and more match these aesthetics as well. The Mission mode sees the player being instructed on specific requirements, such as clearing 2 lines with the L-shaped Tetramino, all while Link is on a mission to rescue Zelda. The Puzzle mode sees a Yoshi Cookie style with the player selecting specific Tetraminos to clear the screen. The main modes with classics like Type A Marathon gameplay are available in a Super Mario aesthetic, though Marathon itself changes to various other NES games as the player progresses. One thing I noticed with this mode is that I could see that Mario would go through his normal motions of clearing levels, but as the difficulty ramped up, I had to move my focus more to the actual gameplay and thus lost sight as to what Mario was doing on the top screen. Even now, modes like the Tower mode are pulling me back to play this. As described in a previous video, a lot of the Wii and DS games I missed playing as I spent a good majority of my time in the aughts and my 20s playing multiplayer only games. I wish I would have gotten and played this when it came out, because it's clear to me that Tetris DS is the best handheld only version of Tetris I've played. But it's not the best Tetris game. That honor belongs to Number 1, Tetris 99, released February 13th, 2019. Even after playing Tetris for nearly 35 years myself, I can say that I've logged the most amount of hours and had the most fun with Tetris 99. While the game itself excels at being a 99-player battle royale that is free to play for NSO subscribers, if you purchase the Big Block DLC, you get all of the offline content. This includes a CPU battle mode, classic Type A Marathon, a local arena, and a 2-player share battle option. All told and combined, there aren't as many of these modes as featured in other versions like Tetris Effect or Tetris DS, but at least it future-proofs the game for when Tetris 99's servers close down. But until those servers do close, the Battle Royale version of Tetris is an absolute blast to play. Just like a normal BR, the player must outlast 98 other opponents to get a victory, or a Tetris Maximus. Just like an opponent-led Tetris game, the player sends and receives lines to and from opponents, but both the player and opponents select whom they attack by the options at the top of the screen. These include random opponents, find opponents near death, those targeting the player, or opponents with the most amount of badges. These badges are acquired by knocking out opponents, and the more badges a player has, maxing out at 4 total, the more garbage players send to opponents. As the player survives and more opponents are knocked out, the speed of the lines falling increases. At the 50 and 10 opponents left mark, the music of the theme the player had selected changes, and these themes are the biggest hidden gems to Tetris 99. While there are a number of classic NES-inspired ones within the game, as well as others, the special event themes that Nintendo holds are the best in the game. These include themes like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Fire Emblem Three Houses, and Super Mario RPG Remake. Being RPG-based, the music changes to more serious boss battle themes at these 50 and 10 opponent incremental marks. And if you're a big RPG fan like myself who also loves the music, this increased urgency these larger boss themes have help to add the emphasis to the overall gameplay itself, especially when it gets down to just 4 opponents or less. There's a lot that can be said about how someone plays Tetris. Do they employ a specific strategy of where specific blocks always go to a certain location? Do they instead use the power of T-spins via the T-tetraminos? Do they use a standard tower building strategy to create Tetrises themselves? Tetris 99 adds to these strategies by the sheer amount of opponents one must face, adding to the pressure of increasing speed and sometimes dizzying heights of build-up blocks is being targeted by more than one person. Keeping a cool head and managing incoming garbage, as indicated by the blocks on the left side of the screen, is paramount to surviving. Just like in life, any modicum of skill in Tetris 99 often leads to being targeted by multiple people. Just like Taylor Swift says, sometimes the garbage takes itself out. But sometimes you just gotta stay calm and give these garbage throwers a hand to throw themselves out. Since its release, I've seen myself go back to Tetris 99 time and time again. Whether it's to help cleanse my gaming palate, or I literally can't think of what to play, Tetris 99 has my back. For this, and all the reasons I've mentioned, it is the best version of Tetris that I've played. But what do you think? What is your favorite version of Tetris? Let me know in the comments section below. Did I forget a version of Tetris that you loved, for example? I'd love to talk with fellow Tetris and puzzle game lovers like myself in the comments. Thanks again though for watching, and have a great day.